Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Dutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these monitors behind me here. If this news is happening anywhere where CBS has a bureau, an affiliate, a correspondent, we're going to bring it to you live right here on CBS News 24/7. President Biden passes the torch. We are recapping the emotional start to the Democratic National Convention and what you need to know about today's speakers. Former President Donald Trump speaks exclusively to CBS News for a wide-ranging interview with Caitlin Huey-Burns. Hear what he had to say about some of the key issues on the campaign trail. Plus, an overnight operation in Gaza, what we know about the recovery of several hostages' bodies, and the latest on ceasefire negotiations as top U.S. officials are still in the region. But we begin this morning with day 2 of the Democratic National Convention, and there are more big names taking to the stage tonight. Yesterday, President Joe Biden ended day 1 of the DNC by looking back at his more than 5-decade-long career. Former Secretary of State and 2016 Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton endorsed Harris, saying it was time to break the glass ceiling. Harris herself made an onstage cameo at the end of President Biden's speech. Watch this.
I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, but I gave my best to you. For 50 years, like many of you, I've given my heart and soul to our nation. And I've been blessed a million times in return.
We're opening the promise of America wide enough for everyone. Together, we've put a lot of cracks in the highest, hardest glass ceiling.
This November, we will come together and declare with one voice, as one people, we are moving forward.
Former President Barack Obama, former First Lady Michelle Obama, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer are scheduled to speak later on. For more on what is happening in Chicago, let's bring in the United States Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, who also spoke at the convention last night. Madam Secretary, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, good morning. First, I want to say I'm here as a former governor, not in my official capacity as secretary, so feel free to call me Gina.
Okay, former governor of the great state of Rhode Island, where I went to college and still love every single day. Good to see you. So let me
nice to see you.
Let me ask you, before we talk about Vice President Harris, let's talk about President Biden and the state of the economy as it is today. There are different views on how things are going, but I think that the most important thing that I'd like to hear from you is, how do you explain an economy that is strong, where we see GDP is strong, where we see inflation coming down, where we see job growth happening, where we see the CPI increasing, but people say, well, you know what, when I'm at the gas pump or when I'm at the grocery store, I still see high prices. How do people reconcile those two?
Yeah, you know, when President Biden took office, he inherited really one of the greatest economic crises of our generation. I know that because I was the governor and we had sky-high unemployment during the pandemic. And today we have the strongest economy in the world. So the president and vice president deserve a huge amount of credit. Costs are coming down, exactly as you said. You know, everyday Americans are still feeling the pinch at the pump or in the grocery store. But that's exactly why Vice President Harris, as president, will focus on costs. I mean, at the center of her economic agenda is continuing to bring down costs, the cost of childcare, cost of groceries, cost of housing, so the everyday American can have a chance that they deserve.
And let me ask you about the next couple of months for the president, President Biden. What would you like to see him attempt to accomplish during the final months of his presidency? I know that he's been very vocal about, and we perhaps are close to seeing a brokered peace deal, a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. There's still some work, as you indicate, on the economy that needs to happen. What would you like to see over the next 5 months?
You know, first I want to say he has been a truly extraordinary president. You know, thank God for Joe Biden. 4 years ago, He beat Donald Trump and saved us from Donald Trump by running. And today, Joe Biden's going to beat Donald Trump again by passing the torch. So this is a man who has given 50 years of his life to this country, and he's just incredible. He's got 5 months left, and he's going to run through the tape and finish the job. As I said, he took us from an economic crisis to the strongest economy in the world. We're building roads and bridges all over the country, connecting people with the internet. He has an incredible presence, engaging with our allies all around the world. I think that you can expect him to, just like he said last night, finish the job, finish strong. And every day that man wakes up, he works as hard as he can for the American people. And I don't think we'll ever, be able to thank him enough.
And Madam Governor, final question. One of the things that I think we finally got a little bit of an indicator from Vice President Harris is some of the things that she's thinking about when it comes to the economy, specifically as it relates to prices, not just of groceries, but also of pharmaceuticals. What do you think of some of the policy decisions that the Vice President is thinking about implementing should she win this election?
As a former businesswoman myself, business owner, former governor, I think she's spot on. I think that Trump's policies are, let's cut taxes on the rich and hope everyone else is fine. Except that's a failed theory. It's never worked. It leaves too many people behind. Kamala Harris is focused on bringing down the cost of child care, bringing down the cost of housing, bringing down the cost of prescription drugs. She's got plans for that. She's focused on expanding and strengthening the middle class, which is the backbone of this country. So, as I said, as a businesswoman, as a governor, I think she's spot on, and we just got to get her over the finish line in November.
All right. Commerce Secretary and former governor of the great state of Rhode Island, Gina Raimondo, thank you so much for joining us, ma'am. We appreciate it.
Have a great day.
All right. Joining me now is CBS News campaign reporter Shauna Mizell. She's been covering the Harris campaign from the very beginning. Shauna, let me ask you about the number of Republicans that are present at this convention, including former Trump White House press secretary, for example, Stephanie Grisham, who announced that she will address delegates tonight. What can you tell me about that?
Good morning, Vlad. That's absolutely right. We expect Stephanie Grisham to address the Democratic National Convention tonight, but she's not the only Republican that will be a part of the programming this week. Some other notable names include former Congressman Adam Kinzinger. We know that Kinzinger was vocally opposing Trump. He actually voted to impeach him and since did not run for re-election. And we can also expect to see support for the Democratic Party coming from the former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, that's Jeff Duncan.
All right. Looks like we're having a technical difficulty with Shauna's shot. So, yes. Wait, Shauna, do we have you? Probably
I'm here, Vlad.
Okay, great. Sorry. They told me that your shot had dropped. Sorry, you were describing the number of Republicans. And in some cases, the question that I sort of have as you're describing them at this convention, are they still Republicans or are they full on, Democrats now? Because we're saying that they're Republicans, but I don't know that they're still in lockstep with the Republican Party. But you were describing Stephanie Grisham and Adam Kinzinger.
A lot of what we've heard from these Republicans is that they don't recognize the Republican Party as it is now. They say that it's become a party of Trump. Now, that's not to say Kinzinger still was a Republican when he was in Congress, but they're just not supporting former President Donald Trump this time around.
All right, Shauna Mizell for us reporting from Chicago. Shauna, thanks so much for jumping on the air with us. We appreciate it. Okay, CBS News will have full coverage of day 2 of the Democratic National Convention throughout the day, plus special programming beginning at 5 p.m. Eastern. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump talked exclusively with CBS News. Among the many things he discussed with our Caitlin Huey-Burns, false claims about Vice President Harris's political ideology. Let me play a bit of that.
They take somebody who didn't get one vote, and the bosses of the Democrat Party just put her there. I think she's going to do very badly. Actually, I think she's going to be easier than Biden, because when people hear that she believes in a Marxist philosophy, which she does, people didn't know all the things that we're bringing out right now. They didn't know it. Her father is a Marxist professor. She believes in Marxism. This country will not sustain that. This country is not going to go for that.
All right. CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi joins me now for more on this interview. So let's just begin, Olivia, with addressing that soundbite. The president making a series of false claims throughout that interview with Caitlin Huey Burns. But the notion that Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, is a Marxist can be debunked right off the face of it.
Yeah, you know, this has been what we've seen from Donald Trump over the last several weeks as his campaign seeks to really identify Kamala Harris and hone their attacks in on her. So the latest attacks that we've heard over the last week and a half is he's calling her Comrade Kamala and saying that she's a Marxist. You know, this is part of their effort to really nail down these attacks on her. Kind of goes to show how they're trying to frame her, and that framing came after her announcement about prices, grocery prices, and their plans to tamp down on high inflation and high prices in that realm. But it just goes to show Donald Trump is really divulging into these personal attacks, attacking her father, attacking her looks, attacking her intelligence. We heard that in several parts of Caitlin's interview yesterday, where Caitlin pushed back and said, what evidence is there to some of these personal attacks and claims that you're making? And Trump says, well, I just think that way, and I just feel that way. You know, we're here in Michigan. Trump will be here later today, and he's expected to focus on crime and safety. That's as his campaign tries to make this race, really, and his positions about policy more notable and contrast it to Vice President Kamala Harris and try to get him kind of away from doing those personal attacks that we've seen from him in the last several months.
Yeah, and even as the campaign perhaps wishes that the former president would focus on those policy differences, as you know, Olivia, and as you reported, the former president seems unable to do that. He's also sharing, which I find kind of remarkable, which is also remarkable that the press isn't making a bigger deal of this. And I don't mean us, but I mean because we're talking about it, but that it hasn't received as much of a focus is a former president of the United States sharing what are clearly fake AI images on his social media pages, including a picture of the vice president surrounded by Soviet-era flags. Also, this is an innocuous one, perhaps, but or even perhaps wishful thinking, but that Swifties for Trump photograph showing AI-generated images of young women who are Taylor Swift fans, supporting Donald Trump. Has the campaign addressed why the president is one of the chief spreaders of misinformation in this country?
No, not necessarily. And Vlad, you know that I am a huge Swiftie, so that is something that certainly caught my attention when I saw those Swiftie for Trump T-shirts that were that he had posted that seemed to be AI generated. But what strikes me about all of this is we've heard Donald Trump in the past talk about artificial intelligence, and even in some interviews he had done, I believe it was in the Logan Paul interview, he talked about how artificial intelligence is something that actually scares him a little bit, that it's something that he's very wary about, that he had seen a video of him that had been doctored and had caused him to be a little concerned about that. So it is notable that he is sharing all of these AI images on his True Social platform. It's certainly something we'll be watching closely.
All right, Olivia Rinaldi, thank you very much for your reporting. As always, you're great. Appreciate it. Okay, let's focus now on cleanup efforts that are picking up across Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. Connecticut's under a state of emergency following a historic round of deadly flooding. Town officials say it will take weeks to repair destroyed bridges and roads in Monroe. 2 people died in Oxford after that torrential rainstorm. Several search crews found those individuals, those victims, who were swept away by rushing floodwaters. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Grant.
Hey, good morning, Vlad. It was just too much rain over a very short period of time. Let me show you some of these rainfall totals. These were observed rainfall totals. These weren't estimated rainfall totals or forecast rainfall totals. This is how much fell in rain gauges across New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. Sandy Hook, Connecticut, this was the highest that I could find. 12.17 inches of rainfall. That's from Saturday night through Monday morning. Just an unbelievable amount of rainfall. Something that you'd almost associate with a tropical system, but this was not a tropical system. Sound Beach, New York, over 10 inches of rain. Newtown, Connecticut, 10 inches of rain, and even down to Waterbury, Connecticut, 5.11 inches of rain. Again, that's all from Saturday night through Monday morning. Rain exiting the Northeast, still some trailing showers up towards New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. Meanwhile, very nice weather across the Midwestern states. Big heat wave. We'll talk about this, Vlad, in a bit. Texas looking at triple-digit temperatures almost all week long. We'll have that here in just a bit. Back to you.
All right, Grant, thanks very much. We'll check in with you a bit later. And now from Chicago to Wisconsin, Vice President Harris and her running mate, there you see them over my shoulder. That's Governor Tim Walz. They are heading to Milwaukee for a campaign event that will coincide with night 2 of the DNC. We're going to go there next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will hold a campaign event in Wisconsin in hopes of energizing voters during the DNC. This is Harris's 3rd visit to the state since becoming the Democratic presidential candidate. CBS News campaign reporter Nydia Cavazos joins me now for more on what we can expect from the rally today and how this will serve as a preview, perhaps, of Harris's speech at the DNC on Thursday. Is it safe to make that assumption, Nydia?
Good morning, Vlad. It is definitely safe to make that assumption since we were with Vice President Harris over the weekend, and she had told us that while she had not quite yet finished her speech up for Thursday, what she was expecting to include was a message about spreading hope, a message about laying out her vision for the future, and also laying out a contrast between herself and what a presidency, what Trump would look like. And this is very similar to what we've already been seeing out in the campaign trail. So it is definitely something that we're expecting to hear later on tonight in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And now the Vice President will be making her way from Chicago to Milwaukee later this afternoon. She's going to be attending her campaign rally along with her running mate, Governor Tim Walz. And we're expecting, according to the campaign, over 10,000 people who will be here attending her rally. Now, as you had mentioned, this is just her 3rd time attending or visiting Wisconsin since becoming a presidential candidate, but 7 times overall in 2024. And now this speaks to the importance that Wisconsin has and truly how significant and how crucial Wisconsin will be for the success of Harris in 2024.
All right, Nydia, thank you so much for your reporting. Appreciate it. We'll check in with you later as we learn of the vice president's arrival. Thanks. All right, let's go to some international news now. Israel says it has recovered the bodies of 6 Hamas hostages who were taken during the October 7th attack. In a statement, Israel's military says its troop recovered the bodies during an overnight operation in southern Gaza. This comes, of course, as Secretary of State Antony Blinken is still in the region for the latest round of ceasefire and hostage deal negotiations. He says Israeli leaders have accepted the U.S. proposal for a deal, and he is urging Hamas to do the same. I want to bring in BBC News correspondent Weira Davies, who is standing by in Jerusalem to talk to us about all this. Weira, so does this agreement by Israeli leaders signal a step in the right direction towards achieving at least not a permanent ceasefire perhaps, but something that allows for a cessation of hostilities so that Israel can get its hostages back and the people in Gaza can take care of their wounded?
I think that's what certainly Mr. Blinken would like and the American government would like. Certainly the Democrats would like it, of course, with the backdrop of this convention and the presidential election. It's important for them that they get some sort of progress on the ground. But I do think that realities on the ground would argue differently. There's still a huge gap between the Israelis and Hamas. There's a complete lack of trust between the two sides. And whatever may have come out of the negotiations between the Israelis and the Americans with the suggestion that Israel was prepared to take the next step, Hamas has accused Israel of moving the goalposts, of reneging on some of its previous promises, if you like, in the event of a ceasefire. And Mr. Blinken has just left Egypt as we speak. He's now heading to Doha, where he'll talk with more negotiators. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Hamas to also accept the basic premise to go forward with peace talks. But I don't think that what Israel has agreed to is going to be something that Hamas can agree to. So the fear, I think, on the ground is that these talks probably won't get very far. There's meant to be a resumption of talks in Cairo at the end of this week. Of course, the aim is, and the American hope is, that there will be a peace agreement, a temporary peace agreement that will lead also to the release of hostages and the partial withdrawal of Israeli troops from parts of Gaza. But the two sides, I think, are still very, very far apart, despite some levels of American optimism over the last couple of days.
Yeah, with that optimism also comes the cold, hard reality on the ground, where, as you know, there are some reports that a strike from Israel on a school killed at least 10 Palestinians in Gaza. What can you tell us about that?
Look, Israel is continuing to strike targets in Gaza. It says it's attacking Hamas targets, but reports from the ground say that in most strikes, many civilians are killed. The latest strike, Israel has admitted, was on a school, which Israel has accused Hamas of using that school as a military base. 12 people are reported to have been killed in that strike. Others have been killed in Israeli strikes over the last couple of days. Reports we're getting from Gaza saying that the Israeli military action is still as intense as it was, in the run-up to these talks. The other big thing for Israel and is, of course, this release, if you like, of these 6 hostage bodies. The Israeli special forces went into Gaza last night and were able to secure the 6 dead hostages. And of course, that's a reminder of how much pressure there is here in Israel for the remaining hostages, especially the 73 who are thought to be alive to be released. There is immense public pressure from the Israeli public on the Israeli government, perhaps not to stop the fighting, but to do so in order to get the hostages released. Every night in Israeli cities, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, in other cities, there are huge demonstrations urging their government to get a deal done, to get the remaining hostages released before more of them, of course, perhaps get killed.
Yeah, and I'm glad you made that point, Weir, because that does appear to be what perhaps changed the calculus. Just 48 hours ago, we were hearing reports that the Israelis were not anywhere close to agreeing to a ceasefire. And now, of course, the news that some of their people, the hostages, are coming home and they have been killed or they have died is incredibly distressing, I'm sure, for the families and for those families who are still waiting for word on their loved ones. So we'll hopefully see that this actually does bear some fruit in the hours ahead. Weir Davies reporting for us from Jerusalem at the BBC. Thank you, Weir. We appreciate it. All right, protesters, you can see them here over my shoulder. Look at that. They have breached, or they were breaching, security fences around the DNC as thousands rallied against the ongoing war in Gaza. We're going to show you how officials are responding and how they're preparing for round 2 of demonstrations later today. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you this morning. U.S. intelligence officials say Iran was behind a hack on Donald Trump's presidential campaign. The FBI and other federal agencies released their findings yesterday, but it's unclear how they determined Iran was responsible. They also did not describe the nature of the information possibly taken from the campaign. Officials believe Iran also tried to hack the Biden-Harris campaign. Iran has denied the allegations. A rocket engine burst into flames during a test launch at Britain's new spaceport. You can see the entire structure was engulfed in flames. The German rocket company was conducting the test at the time as part of a series of trials in an attempt to launch the UK's first vertical rocket into orbit. Officials are working to resolve what went wrong and what caused the explosion. 10 more states have joined a lawsuit accusing Live Nation Entertainment and Ticketmaster of inflating ticket prices and hurting artists. In total, 39 states and the District of Columbia are now involved in the lawsuit. And now about 24 of them added a claim that Live Nation monopolized markets across the industry. That claim allows them to seek 3 times the amount in damages. In a statement to Reuters, Live Nation says the lawsuit will not solve the issues fans care about, like ticket prices and fees. Okay, turning back now to our top story. It's day 2 of the Democratic National Convention, and more big names will be taking to the stage tonight. Former President Barack Obama, former First Lady Michelle Obama, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer are scheduled to speak later on. CBS News Minnesota reporter Caroline Cummings joins us now with the very latest. Caroline, what can we expect from the Obama speeches tonight? What are you hearing?
Good morning, Vlad. So tonight, both the Obamas, the former First Lady Michelle and, of course, former President Barack Obama, will both speak here tonight. And they're both going to focus on why they believe that Harris and her running mate Walz are the candidates for this moment, especially for Michelle Obama's part. She's going to talk about how her experience makes her uniquely qualified to be in this position at the top of the ticket. And President Obama also may reflect on that relationship he has with Harris that goes back decades to when he was just a Senator Barack Obama before he became President Barack Obama. So their relationship is really longstanding and strong. She has connected with him over the past couple of months, and he has always made himself available to lean on, to give advice if she's seeking it. And so that relationship is strong. And he's also going to just make the case to Democrats that the stakes are high in the next 11 weeks on the course to Election Day, that Democrats will really have to kind of double down on their focus and their energy coming out of the DNC. And he will be making that case to Democrats here and Americans looking on, as he is one of the most prominent Democrats to speak here at the convention this week, Vlad.
Yeah, and so, Caroline, given that you live and work and report from the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, just how popular does former President Obama remain within the party? It's said that he and President Biden have had a tense relationship over the past couple of months as pressure was ramped up to have the president consider stepping aside for the vice president. But in terms of the weight that Barack Obama holds within the party, my guess is that it's fairly significant even to this day.
Right, that's right, Vlad. I'm actually based in Minneapolis, but here in Chicago. But I can tell you that from the Minnesota delegates that I know and have spoken with, and from other delegates, you can feel the sense of excitement for really every speaker that's been up here last night. For even President Biden, there was "We Love Joe" signs, as I'm sure you saw and heard those chants last night as well. And President Barack Obama really is seen as that his historic candidacy is not lost on this group here, especially as Kamala Harris has a historic candidacy of her own, and he still really does carry a lot of weight with this party. Obviously, significant presidency, but still seen as a leader within the party with a lot of influence to this day.
All right, Caroline, and I am not going to be that New Yorker who says it's the Midwest. Yes, you work at CBS Minneapolis. Very different from...
I'm in Chicago. It's easy to get mixed up there, Vlad.
I love it. Thanks so much, Caroline. Appreciate you. Okay, sticking with what's happening at the DNC, security, of course, is still a top concern on day 2 of the convention. Following pro-Palestinian protests, thousands hit the streets to speak out against the Biden administration's stance on the war between Israel and Hamas. CBS News foreign correspondent Roxana Saberi is in Chicago right now as the doors reopen. She is based in Chicago. And she can update us on how things played out yesterday and what they can expect for this afternoon. Roxana, good to see you.
Good morning, Vlad. We're just a couple blocks north of the United Center, which is that building back there, and that's where delegates are meeting in the evenings here at the DNC. Now, last night, crews added additional fencing behind me, and our cameraman John is zooming in so you can see. So protesters had breached the outer barrier here, the outer barricade, nearby here, about a block away. But police stopped them before they got to the inner barrier, which is closer to the United Center. So what happened last night after this breach in the barrier, crews put in this middle fencing, this additional fencing. So what happened yesterday was some protesters broke off from the main protest, the main march, and some were carrying pro-Palestinian signs, shouted shame. They tore open the barriers, some got through. Our team witnessed some protesters throw water bottles and signs at police. Police in riot gear, though, pushed them out. Our team there said they didn't see the officers using any tear gas or pepper spray, but they did arrest a few protesters who got through the fence. I want to point out, though, Vlad, most of the protests were peaceful yesterday. We saw perhaps 2,000 to 3,000 protesters marching along a 1-mile route. Many were calling for an end to the war in Gaza, an end to U.S. aid in Israel, and many told us they feel Harris represents a continuation of Biden's policy on Israel. Well, after yesterday's breach in this barricade behind me, Superintendent of Chicago Police Larry Snelling said his department would reassess the security situation, and Chicago police plan to address security and safety concerns in a media briefing this morning. Vlad.
All right, Roxana Saberi reporting for us from Chicago, the epicenter of where all is happening in the political world this week. Thank you, Roxana.
You're welcome.
All right, voters, by the way, are heading to polls in multiple states to cast their primary ballots today. Down ballot primaries are being held in Alaska, Florida, Wyoming, and in Florida. That's where outspoken Congressman Matt Gaetz is facing a challenge from retired Navy officer Aaron Dimmock. Joining me now with the very latest is CBS News Miami reporter Morgan Reiner, who can break down what this race is all about, what this primary race and the stakes in this primary are all about. So, Morgan, explain to our viewers what is significant about the primaries in Alaska and Wyoming today.
Yeah, well, there are several big races here in Florida first that we're really keeping an eye on. And the first one would be Senator Rick Scott, who is running for re-election. You have to remember, Vlad, that in 2018, Rick Scott only won his seat by half a point. So today he is facing two Republicans, but the bigger challenge is going to come during the general election when he's going to be facing a Democrat. One of the Democrats he could be facing is former Representative Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, who has been endorsed by President Biden. She also has a large campaign war chest of campaign funds. And you have to remember, again, that it would really only take the Senate a few seats in either direction to change the direction of power in the Senate. Now, some other races that we're watching, you mentioned over on the House side, is Representative Matthew Gaetz. Now, Gaetz is one of the far-right congressmen who is responsible for ousting former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And now McCarthy is going on what many are calling a revenge tour. And as you mentioned, he is actually sponsoring that Navy veteran. But Gaetz is still expected to win his race. Now, closer to home, there's also another House race that we are watching, and that is two-term Republican Maria Salazar. We don't know exactly who she is going to run against in November. We, of course, will figure that out today. But one of the people she could be running against is a Democratic school board member. Her name is Lucia Baez-Geller, and Baez-Geller is a Latina. And in a county like Miami-Dade County, that could give her an edge, especially because Miami-Dade County only recently flipped red by 1 point in 2020. So those are just some of the races that we are watching. But right now, I can tell you turnout is low. So hopefully that changes in the coming hours.
All right. Morgan Reiner for us, reporting from Florida. Thank you, Morgan. Appreciate it. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast. Grant, over to you.
Hey, good morning, Vlad, and everybody across the Midwest and now moving into the Northeast. Starting to get this taste of fall this morning. Look at some of these current temperatures across the upper Midwest. Minneapolis waking up with temperatures still in the mid-60s. International Falls at 59 degrees. Feeling great in Detroit, 63 degrees. And then over in D.C., temperatures currently are right around 68 degrees. So starting to get that early fall feel. Actually, many of us waking up with temperatures feeling more like, well, late September as opposed to late August. But regardless, many of you welcoming this change. Now, it's not like that everywhere. We'll talk about the heat across Texas here in just a second because it is really hot over portions of central and eastern Texas. Warm and dry conditions over on the West Coast. San Francisco looking at high temperatures around 75 degrees this afternoon. Vegas at 110. Look how nice it is this afternoon across the Midwestern states all the way down into the Mid-South. 74 degrees this afternoon in Cincinnati. I talked about the heat across Texas. Many places from Dallas down to Houston underneath excessive heat warnings today, with most of the rest of the state underneath heat advisories. Temperatures in Dallas around 102, feeling like close to 110 this afternoon. Houston feeling like 108 degrees this afternoon. It's even hotter tomorrow in many places back towards Lubbock, 105 with feels like temperatures not as bad, but still very hot conditions, especially this time of the year. Several places looking at record high temperatures, if not today, potentially tomorrow. Austin, Texas, 106 for the next couple of afternoons. Doesn't look to be until the weekend until temperatures cool down. down to 99 degrees for Saturday afternoon. All the while, low temperatures barely dropping into the upper 70s. So the heat wave continues across the South, Vlad. Meanwhile, fall-like weather on the way across the Midwest and Northeast.
All right, Grant, I'll take it. Thanks very much. A massive fire is raging for a third straight day at a Russian oil depot after being hit by Ukrainian drones, and it's all part of Ukraine's Kursk incursion. What the country's president has deemed a success so far. We're going to take you there live. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Russian firefighters are struggling to put out a fire at an oil depot that was hit by a Ukrainian drone. I always get this wrong on this camera. I always get this wrong, Larry. It's over here. The depot was being used by the Russian military. CBS News foreign correspondent Ian Lee is in Ukraine, and he joins me now. So, Ian, I want to get to this effort to fight the flames at the depot, but I want to first ask you about this trip that you took into almost what would look to me to be the Russian border, perhaps even into Russia itself. Just describe what you saw.
Yeah, Vlad, we went right up to the Russian side of the border. We didn't go into Russia. We stayed on the Ukraine side. But what we saw was a vast number of military vehicles moving up and down that road. That is a very vital road for the military effort by the Ukrainians inside the Kursk region. We saw tanks, we saw armored personnel carriers. Critically, we saw supply trucks. We saw a lot of vehicles moving in with soldiers, with supplies for these soldiers that are continuously pushing deeper into the Kursk region. And what they're doing is what is best for the Ukrainians. They're moving with speed, aggression, and maneuverability, able to take large chunks of territory. And we heard from last night, we heard from the Ukrainian president, who said that the goal was to create a buffer zone around that part of Ukraine. It could be used later in a swamp. They didn't really spell out what that part of the objective is. But speaking with residents along that border, they said that ever since this operation happened, the artillery strikes have stopped, but they are still getting bombs. They are still getting missile strikes. So it's still a very hot area. But the residents there are glad to see that the Ukrainians are finally taking the fight into Russia, so that the Russians are feeling what it has been like for them the last 2.5 years.
And the reporting from you and others, Ian, is that the Ukrainians now control some 400 square miles of Russian territory?
Yeah, almost 500 square miles, Vlad. And they have been able to just take larger and larger chunks. And again, this is something that the Ukrainians are well adapted at. This plays right into their playbook of about being able to use the weapons they have to take large pieces of territory. But we also heard from the Ukrainian president, who said he felt that they are being tied back a bit, that they aren't able to use some of the more sophisticated Western weapons inside Russia because the West doesn't want those weapons to be used. They see that as an escalation. Zelensky said that this shows that they have crossed what Putin said is his red line. There hasn't been any severe retaliation. So Zelensky wants the gloves off. He wants to be able to use all the weapons inside Russia, Vlad.
Yeah. And Ian, quickly, what's going on with that fire?
This is something that's interesting. We've seen kind of grow over the course of this war is Ukraine's ability to launch drones deep into Russian territory, striking refineries, striking air bases, striking weapons depots to really knock it out and disrupt Russia's logistics. And so this refinery, it's east of Ukraine. It's a large refinery. It's been burning for 3 days. About 500 firefighters, we're hearing, are involved in trying to tackle this blaze. But Ukraine says that this is a strategic attack. They want to go after Russia's ability to wage war and also its economy. Vlad?
All right. Ian Lee for us, reporting from Ukraine, doing some very dangerous, courageous reporting, and also following these Ukrainians who are doing some incredibly courageous fighting. Ian, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, search efforts are resuming off the coast of Italy to find 6 people still missing after their boat sank early Monday morning, but deep waters are complicating the efforts. A violent freak storm hit the luxury yacht off the coast of Sicily near Palermo. At least 22 people on board died during the incident. Terrible, terrible story. CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay has an update from Rome. So, Chris, this is such a distressing, terrible story. Just before we talk about the search and recovery at this point, I think people are, in people's minds, this happened while the boat was out to sea, but that's not the case. Just take us through what we know about how this tragedy unfolded.
Hey, Vlad. Yeah, it was actually anchored just off the coast of Palermo, about half a mile. And, it was so surprising because, usually in these situations, you have the sail down and sailboats are supposed to weather these types of storms quite well, but that clearly wasn't the case. Now, 15 people were rescued. That included a 1-year-old child. However, 6 people do remain missing, and largely the search and rescue mission has been turned into a search and recovery mission. That's because divers have already been able to spot several bodies inside the cabins of this super yacht. However, they have had a really hard time accessing them because of what they say is a world of objects obstructing access to the hull of the ship. That includes furniture and luggage that's blocking their entrance.
So, Chris, I should point out that I misspoke earlier and read the copy incorrectly. At least one of the 22 people on board is confirmed to have died, and they are still searching for 6 others. And you mentioned the 15 that have been rescued so far off this vessel, including that 1-year-old. So what are the challenges right now that emergency crews are facing?
A big one is that the depth is immense. It's 160 feet below the surface of the water, so they have to limit the amount of time they can actually spend underwater. Rescuers can only spend 10 minutes at a time in and around the ship, so that means they've got to turn around and come back up, and so far that's meant not with any of the bodies at hand. And as I already mentioned, they're blocked by furniture, they're blocked by luggage, and they're also dealing with bad weather, the same weather that was a big cause of this storm to begin with. Of this shipwreck. It's certainly not as bad as it was at the time, but it's not very good either.
All right, Chris Lipsey reporting from Rome for us. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Day 2 of the Democratic National Convention about to get underway. We'll have continuing coverage ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. A relic of the days before selfies is the new rage from the digital age. CBS News Bay Area reporter Itai Had has a snapshot of a surprising comeback.
It's a developing trend.
So cute.
Where old school charm meets today's selfie culture. Photo booths, those once ubiquitous machines, are making a comeback.
There's something about the sounds that just make it part of a bigger experience.
Kayla Kane is a 26-year-old content creator. She says these vintage photo booths are becoming popular among those looking for an authentic, unfiltered moment.
You have one try and then you're done. You can't be Kim Kardashian taking 500 selfies.
Walk into PhotoWorks, a photography shop in San Francisco, on a weekday morning, and you might think you stumbled into a trendy after-hours club. Store owner David Handler says ever since he brought in the booth, his store has been flooded with Gen Zers.
These people just keep swarming in here all day, all the time, just because of this.
They're basically like happiness machines.
Doug Ellington is the co-founder of Photomatica, a San Francisco-based company that owns and operates more than 200 of these booths across the country. He says interest spiked only recently.
My boyfriend bought an original photo booth from the 70s.
After a swell of viral TikToks made them cool again.
I didn't expect it would take off like this with lines at a photo booth. That's kind of a business owner's dream.
The secret to taking a good portrait, he says, is being a little goofy.
All right, let's do the chin back to back. Get another, And then lastly, we'll do the mouth open.
Oh my God.
As for Kayla, she couldn't wait to expose her followers to this catchy new trend.
Look at that.
Going from vintage to viral and proving these old photo booths are no flash in the pan. Itai Had, CBS News, San Francisco.
An encore of CBS Mornings coming up next.